Welcome to the November 16th meeting of the Sherborn School Committee. My name is Nancy Cordell, and I call this meeting to order at 6:33 p.m. This open meeting is being conducted remotely, consistent with the Act extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, signed into law by Governor Baker on June 16th, 2021. Information on how to join the remote school committee meetings and meeting agendas are posted on the Dover Sherborn School website. Please note this meeting is being recorded. Please be aware that anything you broadcast or broadcast by mistake may be captured on this recording. And this is the part of the agenda that we go into public comment. I didn't know if Jane's iPad, there's one other person that we have. If Jane, you wanted to make a public comment, because I will read the public comment.
Jane is probably I think that's Jane, our Sherborn advisory member.
Okay.
Who's on for the budget. Yeah.
Okay, great. So I'm going to skip over the community comment section.
I think unless yep, I'm pretty sure it's.
Okay. All right, great. So we will go right into next on the agenda is Beth with the update, superintendent update.
Great. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. All right, good evening, everyone. I am here on behalf of Kathleen Smith, our interim superintendent, who had the opportunity to attend a conference today, so she is not here with us, but I will be providing information on her behalf as well as my own. Just an update on the vaccination threshold. We know at Pine Hill School, finally, we are at the point where our students ages 5 to 11 can be vaccinated, which is very exciting. And we already see many of our families taking advantage of that opportunity. That said, knowing that there are siblings at the middle and high school, we wanted to give you an update of what's happening at the region since we are one system. So as you know, as of October 15th, DESE announced that if any of our schools reach 80% vaccination rate or more, we can ask permission to unmask our students and staff. And so we submitted a request to DESE on October 20th. And if they grant permission, then the ball is back in our court, and we can therefore work with the boards of health and the school committees to decide when it's safe to unmask our schools. Even if we unmask, unvaccinated students and staff would be required to wear masks. For school districts in Massachusetts that do not choose to unmask under this opportunity, the mask mandate has been extended through January 15th. And we'll see what happens after the holidays. That could be extended as well. So we'll continue to work with the boards of health to determine a timeline for safe unmasking. And at their meeting last week on November 10th, they did approve lifting of the indoor mask mandate should DESE give us the green light to have jurisdiction to make that decision. So the Board of Health and Kathleen Smith will be working with the regional school committee on deciding if and when it's appropriate to unmask at the region. Dover Sherborn Middle School, so current vaccination rates. Again, our sixth graders, originally only a few were eligible because they were age 12, but now that the age bracket has been extended, more and more are getting vaccinated. So here are our current figures. You'll see that 63% of our middle school students are vaccinated, 99% of our staff. So overall, that's a 68% average at the middle school, which continues to grow as our younger students are getting their first shots. At the high school, here are our statistics. Students, 88% vaccinated, staff, 100% vaccinated, for a total average of 89%. So that is the superintendent's overview, and I will hand it over to Dr. Brown.
Good evening. I am going to talk about our Mcas scores from spring 2021 administration, and then talk about some of the attributes of academic excellence at our school. Unfortunately, and I don't think this will be a surprise for any of you to hear, our Mcas scores of students assessed last spring were depressed. Whether our teachers obviously are getting to know students through assessment, through qualitative information, and are responding to students' needs. The Mcas score, we look at holistically to inform us about curriculum. We look at student individual scores as one data point when we're assessing what supports or challenges students may need. With the Mcas scores, it's last year, our analysis of some of our students is a little murky, whether there were skill deficits or whether it was test taking skills or whether it was just overall school fatigue with the type of year we had. We're obviously responding to Mcas as one piece of information. And lucky for us, we have lots of data points on our students' growth over time to inform us in helpful ways with regard to social, emotional, and academic learning. Typically, our scores, typically about 75 to 80% of our students show that they meet or exceed the grade level benchmark on any Mcas indication. And last year, that dropped by a good 10%, and you'll see, we'll go through the individual scores, but 60 to 70% of our children scored in a range that showed that they had met or exceeded the grade level standards. So therefore 30, and in a couple cases, particularly in math, up to 40% of our students did not meet the benchmark, the criterion referenced material that was assessed on the Mcas. And it's disheartening, and it's our reality. I wanted to speak, this slide speaks to how we look holistically at our progress within each of the content domains of the Mcas. Our teachers do an item analysis, and we look at the trends with different questions, different types of questions, how our students respond. And then, of course, we respond to individual students and their needs. An overall takeaway is, with or without COVID, our students don't score as well as we want them to in questions that require written expression. So an overall area for focus for us is helping our students be deeper and more accurate writers. And as you know, we've got a whole initiative behind the Readers and Writers Workshop that we are confident will help us grow our students as readers and writers in that area. Beth, next slide, please. So this is a quick peek, and we'll do this for each grade level within each of the English, language arts, math, and science areas. This shows a peek at 2018, 2019, 2021. In this particular shot, there's not a lot of statistical discrepancy with previous years. You'll see in some other areas that there are. The good news is that we have 0% of students last spring who were not meeting expectations. If there were a silver lining, I would lift that. Next slide. Fourth graders in the area of English language arts, again, noticeably depressed. You can see we don't have nearly the students who exceed expectations, and therefore we have more, again, it might be statistically nominal, but to see that 5% of our students were not meeting expectations or refused to test or didn't test well, usually we see a nominal percentage of students in that category. So obviously that's something we're paying close attention to. Next slide.
Barbara, you just said, sorry to interrupt, did you say refuse to test?
Well, we have some students who refuse to test, yes. And at our age level, that's usually directed by parent preference that students not partake in the Mcas. But any student in Massachusetts can sit in front of the test and not take it. Some families have their kids do that for philosophical reasons. And that is the case at Pine Hill School.
Okay. And
Except if they're on IEPs, they have to take the MCAS test, right?
Well, everybody has to take the MCAS score. Every child's scores get factored into our average.
But I thought it wasn't it for parents that have kids on an IEP. I thought it wasn't a choice. I thought they still had to take the MCAS to be on the IEP.
Students who have more moderate to severe disabilities, we are able to use an alternative way to assess them, a portfolio assessment, but we're not allowed to use that measure for more than 1% of our students. Everybody else has to take the MCAS or their scores are factored in as a 0, correct, Beth?
Yes, in a typical year, actually last year, families who chose not to take the MCAS, it was not factored against us. We were held harmless.
Thank you. Thank you for reminding me of that. Yes. But on any given year, Dennis, we definitely have families, again, for whatever reason, that have we call it opting out, but there's no such thing as opting out of the MCAS.
But if I'm inferring what you're saying, again, setting statistical significance aside, that number went up because presumably there were a couple folks that decided their kids didn't want to test, so it wasn't even included in that 5%. Because
you're correct. Our number went up, and families who chose not to take the MCAS were not factored in last year because of the allowance during the pandemic.
So if you were to do an apples to apples, everybody was in that number, that red bar arguably would be a little bit higher. Is that?
That is correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So I think our fifth grade.
So here we're looking at 5th grade. Again, you can see the good news is 27% of our kids exceeded expectations and 39% of our kids met expectations. But you can see, we have a higher percentage of kids that are not meeting or partially meeting.
Okay, 3rd grade math.
3rd grade math. 3rd grade math and 4th grade math are the areas that are most depressed statistically for us in this assessment. And again, whether it's content, whether it's test taking, practice and skills, probably a combination of all of the above. But it is, as you recall last year, in our remote model and in our hybrid model and in our mostly in-person model, our teachers try to have the most fidelity to reading, writing, and mathematics as priority content areas during the turbulence of the different phases of school opening. So this is 4th grade math, and again, only 62% of our students met or exceeded expectations. We've every year our cohorts fluctuate, the scores fluctuate, a little bit. This is significant. This is what we're responding to this year, and our students are, they have a lot of gaps.
And seems as though 4th and 5th grade were most affected during this past year and a half. Am I?
It's interesting. According to, and we'll talk a little bit later about how how our kids get tier 1 or tier 2 intervention. I'm talking about our general education population who are not making effective progress in an academic content area or socially and emotionally. My overall impression is that the younger the cohort of students at our school right now, the more depressed the the higher the number of students getting academic and social emotional intervention is. So our younger kids whose foundation of starting school and beginning school, first graders, second graders especially, have the largest gaps according to the way we look at data and respond through our intervention model. Obviously, our younger students don't take the MCAS, so looking at our third, fourth, and fifth grade students, our third and fourth grade, last year's third and fourth grade students in the area of math scored the lowest.
And lastly, science.
And this is science, and again, you know, the number of students that meet expectations is similar. The number of students that exceed expectations is less, and therefore the number of students who partially met expectations is higher. Our students definitely had compromised science and social studies instruction during school closure and during the school opening phases of last year. Normally, our students score very high in science, and I always attributed it to the high reading levels of our students, their curiosity in nonfiction subjects, information-based texts that our kids gobble up in our school library, as well, of course, as our science program and instruction. So I believe the next slide, Beth, talks about.
Oh, hold on, I have to go back to the other. I'm sorry.
Can I ask a question, or maybe it's an observation? So I'm just wondering if you might put this in context for us a bit, in that this is a trend statewide. If I'm thinking of what I've read and what I know anecdotally from other districts. And so I feel like the context might be important. I'm not surprised. This was one of the things I expected when the state decided to give the MCAS last spring. And, you know, this is where our kids are, but the MCAS is only one measurement. And I think we need to keep in mind the fact that it was a global pandemic and kids were struggling in lots of ways, which, you know, affected their ability to take a test. And there were lots of other things they learned. So I don't want to lose sight of that.
Thank you, Amanda. That's important to point out. And I should have led with that. Yeah, I mean, we you know, when we get our scores, we see our students in our school, in our district, which in Sherborn's case is the same cohort of students, and as compared to students statewide. And you know, we always exceed the state average, and we should. This year, we're our scores look closer to the state average than far above.
Do we get individual student data? And the reason I'm asking that is, are we seeing generally kids are sliding one of the bands, or are there people that were disproportionately affected and maybe slid from last year or 2 years ago exceeding down into the partially meeting? From an equity and kind of understanding, are people generally just falling one degree, or are there any that are in the 2 or more degree bucket?
We only had one student who kind of flatlined compared to previous MCAS scores. Flatline meaning you know, in the lowest rating category, and I suspect that was a test taking. That the student wasn't engaging with the test. Other than that, we have students, when I look at our last year's fourth and fifth graders for whom we had the previous, you know, we had at least a third grade MCAS to compare them to. Most students, if students didn't meet the expectation, they went down one quadrant, not 2 quadrants.
Thank you.
We lost. backwards. There we go.
So, on a positive note, we talk a lot about academic excellence, as you know, K through 12, and at the regional level, particularly at the high school, there's a lot more quantitative measures. At the elementary school, we have a lot of criterion referenced assessments that we use in the content areas, but our students aren't engaging in a whole lot of standardized testing. When you look at the high school's areas of academic excellence, they're able to put a lot of percentiles and percentages in place. So we put together a list of, I wanted to look at qualitative and quantitative indicators of academic excellence at our school. And I think the two outstanding areas that Pine Hill known for are the strong school culture and family partnerships and some of the indicators there, and the well-rounded academic and social emotional learning focus that we have taken on, especially the last 3 years or so, since our strong engagement and challenge success. And I'm so thankful for that. We had no way of knowing that a pandemic was in our future when we started that work. And boy, oh boy, our students need that balance and that well-rounded instructional support more than ever. Our children, I know I say this in different ways at every school committee meeting, our children are exuberant and happy and frolicky and eager to engage with the grown-ups and their peers at Pine Hill School. That said, we certainly have more incidents of children exhibiting anxious feelings, regression in social skills, or what we call just overall dysregulation, be it behavioral dysregulation or sensory dysregulation, but kids that get out of sorts and for whom it's hard to calm their body or control their emotions in a pro-social way. And so the supports we've put in place this year have, and the foundation that was laid leading up to this year I'm very, very grateful. I know schools everywhere are struggling with higher incidents of disciplinary infractions and students who are not happy to be at school and who are disengaged with learning. And I'm really grateful for the foundation we have. So these were some of the qualitative indicators. Happy to speak to any of them. And the next slide talks about some of the quantitative indicators. Our school attendance, on any given day, we have 95% daily school attendance. I was looking today, and our Panorama platform puts that nice and pretty for me every time I want to look at that. And third grade has the highest attendance rate so far this year. So go third grade. Our class size guidelines, thank you. You refined those going into this school year. We're very lucky to have educational assistance through general education. Most school systems have the support, extra support allocated through special education. And as you know, those 8 staff members, in addition to supervisory duties around lunch and recess and precess, they help teachers manage and supervise students, and they help teachers staff small group instruction and instructional supports in the classroom. And of course, our world language program that you committed to 9 years ago. Our current 8th graders are the first cohort. I talked about our, typically we can count on 80% of our students measuring in a quantitative way that they are meeting the grade level expectations at any given time, and the other 20% get support through either MTSS intervention or special education. This year, obviously, more students are are not yet showing solid mastery of the skills we would expect, and we have a plan to work on that. I don't know if there's another slide, Beth. I think, oh, now we go into the big picture.
Okay, so I'm going to take it back as the assistant superintendent at this point. So in terms of talking about academic excellence, as you know, we've been a challenge success district for almost 10 years. We've developed our Portrait of a Graduate, which focuses on skills that students need to master through content. And most recently, we've been talking about equity to make sure that all of our students have access to a rigorous, enriched curricular experience. So we've started the conversation. It took a little bit of a halt during the pandemic, but I think it's time that we return to the conversation about how we as a district want to define excellence. So as Barb mentioned, there's quantitative and there's qualitative indicators. Some are public and some are private. Public examples include Boston Magazine and US News and World Report, which rank school systems either within the Metro West Boston area or across the country based on these factors. And I think it's important to understand what these rankings are based on. So Boston Magazine, for example, looks at average class size, student-teacher ratio, Mcas proficiency, SAT scores, graduation rate, college enrollment, etc. A couple of points that should be made. Our graduation rate has fluctuated between 99, 98, 96%. And that is indicative of the Challenge Success program in that we have started to expand our definition of success and think about what students should do after graduation. So while we want all of our students to eventually attend a 2 or 4 year college, some are opting to take a gap year, either to experience the world, do some community service, figure out how they want to spend their 4 years and their $250,000 before they dive in. And so students who do not go directly to college, those kids affect the graduation rate, which affects our Boston ranking. Educator Evaluations are a new indicator that were included last year. And so just as our students in Mcas are ranked into 4 categories, so are our educators. And we talked a little bit about this with the new system that we have in place. So Boston Magazine looked at the percentage of teachers who were either proficient or exemplary and used that in their decision as to where school systems would compare to each other. US News and World Report, on the other hand, puts a strong emphasis on students, especially seniors, who take 1 or more AP courses. And of course, this is important, especially in a district like Dover-Sherborn, where we want our students to access rigorous college level coursework. And we often hear from our graduates that they are well prepared for college level classes, both in content and in their organizational skills. So yes, that is important. Mcas proficiency is counted. They have some sort of way of calculating what they think we should get on Mcas and then compare it to what we actually get on Mcas, which I would love to know more about that. US News looks at the scores of our students who are in free and reduced lunch, as well as our Black and Brown students, which of course we want to make sure that everyone is excelling. So an important factor. And then again, students who graduate in 4 years. So now that we've made a conscious effort to keep more of our students in district with their peers in their neighborhood, as opposed to sending them out of district, any student who might take 5 years or 6 years to graduate does not help in this area. So I just wanted to highlight the factors that are included here and also the irony of Boston Magazine in 2021. So if you look down below, this was pulled from Boston Magazine, you'll see that Dover-Sherborn High School last spring had 674 students. Our average class size was 16.4. Our teacher to student ratio was 11:6. Now the 91 is the percentage of 10th graders who scored proficient or advanced in ELA on the Mcas exam. What's interesting is I don't know where that data came from. In 2021, 94% of our kids scored proficient or advanced. There was no exam in 2020. And in 2019, it was 89%. So that 91% is curious to me, which of course, if you're comparing us to a neighboring district who is at 92 or 93%, that could make a difference if the number is incorrect. The 92 After that is 2021 data in math. The 99 is 99% students proficient and advanced in science. We didn't take the science exam in 10th grade in 2021 or 2020, so that's based on 2019 data. And the last square there, 85.4% of our teachers in 2018 were evaluated to be either proficient or exemplary. 10.4 were exemplary. That was 2018 data. And given any constructive criticism or feedback that we wanted to give to our teachers, that number can fluctuate. In fact, the following year, you can see there was a shift towards 18% of our teachers being exemplary. So one year can make a huge difference. And depending on the equation that these organizations use, our ranking can fluctuate for a number of reasons. So that said, thinking about all the data points that Dr. Brown mentioned that our educators use on a regular basis, thinking about the information that we have from Challenge Success, from the Metro West Youth Risk Survey, the SEL survey that we've started last year and will continue this year, the equity audit, staff diversity, the scores of our English language learners, how many students are being referred for IEPs, how many students we keep in the district or send out of district. There are so many factors that we could use to measure success. And I think that, again, we paused the conversation during the pandemic, but I think it's important to return to it and continue the conversation. And many districts develop their own report card or performance report that is created once a year and sent out to all families and community members to kind of give a bigger picture of the qualitative examples that Dr. Brown mentioned of all the wonderful things happening at Pine Hill or the middle school or the high school that you wouldn't know by just picking up a magazine. So a possibility to expand our definition of success, do a little positive PR, and let the Dover-Sherborn community know all the wonderful things that are happening in the district that aren't specifically based on standardized numbers. So that's our presentation. We're happy to take questions on any part of it. I also want to apologize. My last few presentations have been out of breath, which is actually a health issue.
Oh my gosh.
But it's in treatment. So we'll be okay.
Sorry. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Brown. So, as I sit here and listen to looking at the Mcas scores again, which is more of just looking at the trend than like the actual scores. And Barbara, which, attending the advisory council meeting where you talked about the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and all the different, the preponderance of students that have been deemed that they need extra, they're not meeting the standards that not the Mcas standards kind of are where they should be. Are we staffed up enough? Are we like, I feel like since I've known you that we're always doing great things like trying to move people around and use 4 of a person. But I feel like this is, I don't want to say crisis, but we're in a really tough spot. I know everyone is, but I'm just talking about Sherborn, right? Sherborn is in a tough spot student-wise. Do we have enough? I mean, here I don't see like we're hiring these people. Do we need more staff? Do we need smaller class sizes to address the gaps that we have? I mean, these are gaps, and these are gaps that will be here for, 2 or 3 years. And, I understand that everyone is feeling that everywhere, but I don't really care about everyone on this call. I care about our school and I care about our kids. And from, I don't, from a budget standpoint, it does, where can we find money if we have to find money? I don't know exactly how this works, but I do think that, I'd love to hear like a week plus 5 people or plus 4 people, this year and maybe next year to address gaping holes. I mean, I don't want to be, getting everyone the help that they need. And I know, and Beth, you have said before, like, we're going to meet students where they are, which I think is awesome, but we might need more help meeting students where they are. So I just would love to hear, and I guess that's my concern of the whole thing, because I don't hear a lot of, and I know there's strategies and everything else, but sometimes it's manpower, raw manpower to actually help this. So
I'll start by talking about how we've increased staff this year. Historically, in recent history, we've had one interventionist in the budget. This year, we added a second interventionist using ESSER money, and we kept Mary Lucy on, who's retiring November 30th, as a classroom teacher serving in an interventionist role. We will replace her position when she leaves us on November 30th using Title I money. So we will have a total of 3 interventionists providing social, emotional, and academic support for kids. And you recall me saying about 25% of our school right now, 112 children, are receiving intervention through our general education intervention system. That's not children who are getting specially designed instruction through special education. We added a 0.5 social emotional learning teacher this year. We shared that position with Chickering. That position has been pivotal in helping teachers respond to individual and small group needs. Our school counselor schedule is straight out, of course, with kids who need counseling support. Our social emotional learning teacher, and of course there's overlap in all of these jobs, but our social emotional learning teacher is providing what we call Tier 1 interventions. She's in classrooms providing education around social thinking curriculum and zones of regulation, and soon to launch some anti-bullying curriculum, and all of those explicit education that we provide through general education. Our counselor is more geared to Tier 2, children, working with children individually or small groups of children. Might be on social skills, it might be on coping skills, affective, responding to anxiety, trauma events. And our school psychologist mostly works in the Tier 3 realm, providing highly individualized related service supports to children who have IEPs and who have a need for psychological intervention, maybe due to their disability. So,
does that mean plus, plus from a normal year, that's plus how many people, like I know you, and Barbara, this is not, I know you're like doing everything possible, like.
Well, it's to degrees, yeah, it's to degrees. So we've essentially added 2.5 interventionists, if you count the SEL teacher and the 2 interventionists. We've also increased our capacity to coach teachers by adding the 0.5 math specialist. The math specialist is not in our building. When children get intervention, it needs to be a minimum of 3 to 5 times a week with very targeted focus, depending on what they need. So our part-time people who were juggling between 2 buildings are not able to effectively provide hardcore intervention because they're not in our building frequently enough for kids who need multiple hits per week. But they are able to coach. What we're doing, there's 2 ways to look at this. Our most fragile kids are getting a lot of intervention through our educational assistants. In a perfect world, we would have more highly trained teacher certified folks providing those interventions. It's not how we've done it in this district. So we are using our gen ed assistants, and we're stealing time from our teacher schedule with the WIN block we've talked about before, how 4 times a week, every classroom teacher has a 30-minute block where they're not introducing new instruction. And we call it the WIN block, WIN being the acronym for what I need. And that's where that's where we're cheating a little bit, if you will. We're using classroom teachers and educational assistants in addition to these interventionists to really plug in a lot of support for kids at that grade level, so that they're not being pulled out of direct instruction in a content area to get their double dose of reading or math or social emotional instruction. There are trade-offs in doing it that way, and there are great efficiencies in doing it that way. If you're a child who needs both mathematics intervention and English language arts intervention, sometimes we're prioritizing and we're not providing what you need across all domains because of time and staffing. So yes, we can always use more staff. Philosophically, we could use more highly qualified staff. We've obviously chosen, we need to be reasonable, in our district, we're not paying teacher level people to be interventionists for the most part. This year we were lucky, we got more Title I money than we had gotten in the past. So we will maintain that third interventionist for the rest of this year, hopefully moving forward, but we don't get the Title I grant until next summer. So you can't bank on a grant position. You will notice when John gets to the budget overview, we built in not one, but two interventionists in next year's budget.
So, Amanda, one second, so just for the attorney, right? Is there more money and Barbara, thank you for that. But I mean, it sounds to me that we need more hard quality staff. I'd love to hear what the other members have to say too, just looking at the numbers of kids that need kids that need the help. And I just, and I'll let Amanda go, but I wonder how the ESSER, if we have more money and how that is distributed and spent, and that can be direct tied to hiring people for educational gaps, furniture and stuff, but also it can be tied to hiring more staff. And I don't know when I don't even know how, I'm not sure, maybe I missed it in a meeting, how much we got for Sherborn directly and how we use those funds. You could speak to that, but I'll let Amanda go first.
Thanks, Nancy. Yeah, I had a question about developing the capacity of the people we do have. I hear you, Barbara, about wanting to have highly trained interventionists, and ideally we'd have a math specialist in the building all the time and not split between buildings. But is there professional development that we can have our educational assistants doing to further develop their capacity? And I mean, I know we have a lot of great people in that building, and the more we can give them the skills they need to meet the moment, I think the better for everyone, for them and for the kids. And so I just wondered about that and the availability of money for that, if necessary.
We've been doing a lot of what I would consider very effective growing opportunities for our education assistants through our math and literacy coach, through our social emotional learning teacher. Tomorrow morning, Allison Gullingsrud is training all of our educational assistants on some of the generalized strategies that are really important to know about when supporting kids in Readers and Writers Workshop, conferring, constructive complimenting, some of the teaching techniques, and they get, where the teachers are maybe have a 30,000 foot view of the big picture of reading and writing behavior. Our ed assistants maybe have a 10,000 foot view. But yes, there is, many times I'll see an ed assistant at the professional learning, the grade level team meeting, and especially those grade level team meetings where the teaching teams are inviting either the literacy coach or the math coach for very specific analysis of how to group kids, what are next instructional steps. I'm not pacing my math unit in accordance with the other teachers at this grade level, but here's why I feel like my kids need a little bit more time with such and such a skill. So there's definitely a big picture of coordination, and our educational assistants are definitely plugged into that. We're very lucky. Our 3 interventionists, all of whom, once Mary Lucy retires, all of whom are paid, they're paid the same rate as an educational assistant. All 3 of those folks are not only certified teachers, but some of them have, one of them has a reading specialist background. One of them is, has many years teaching experience. So we're very lucky that people, as I tell them, we will fill your bucket, maybe not your bank account, but we will fill your bucket. So we're very lucky that people who are super qualified for these positions are eager to work in our school. And I'm sure that's the case all through DS.
And I'll just add, we do provide PD hours in the educational assistance contract. So they have 2 days built in. One, obviously, they get to come the day before students and work with teachers on that full day before students arrive. And then they have another day that we typically have them either participate in the full PD day if it's appropriate that the teachers have in November, or 2 early release Wednesdays they stay and can do PD. So we leave that to the buildings, but there is time built in, at least a base level of time built into their contract to make sure there is some professional development. And we can always add more as needed.
And we've sent our interventionists to foundations training, our word study program, particularly used to be K2. Now we're doing that program K3. So we're really still, making sure we're shoring up the spelling and the phonics, et cetera, all the way through 3rd grade. And one of our main go-to math intervention approach for our youngest learners is what's called the Kathy Richardson program. It's an excellent and explicit way to teach kids number sense and to assess them through very explicit observation. Many of our like districts, this is the go-to model. It's really effective. So we've sent folks out to training, and we do a train the trainer model within our, and those are the kinds of things that we're visiting periodically because of staff turnover, or just because of, maybe if somebody's worked with upper grade levels for a while, they need a tune up with working with our young mathematicians and readers and writers, or vice versa.
Can I go, or were you gonna, did you have anything?
Dennis, sorry, I forgot I was on mute. Yes, go ahead, Dennis.
So thank you for that. And Barbara, I think everything that you've summarized both here, I know we've talked directly before, is all in the spirit of kind of supporting the kids and making sure that we're responding directly to some of these circumstances that are surfacing due to sort of any number of different reasons. I'll say it directly. I don't buy that we have the appropriate resources to solve this problem. And maybe it's there, but it's just not adding up for me. We've got like 112, 120 or so kids that have some sort of a deficiency that was identified and discussed during our last meeting. These Mcas scores, albeit just a score and a test, are suggesting a trend over time, and maybe not something that is going to be persistent. It may be transitory, but it's something that feels as though it needs to be addressed. So I need something that helps me square up. But the way you've explained it, basically 3 FTEs versus 112 kids that have some sort of situation that needs some sort of help or address. And that sounds like it's above and beyond the kids that have some sort of a specific dedicated IEP program. The math, just three teachers that seem to be spread over lots of different things. I fully support sort of supporting our current educators with additional skill sets to be able to do some of this one-on-one, hit it right during a class sort of series or whatever it might be. It doesn't seem like it's enough. And maybe you can help me kind of, round off that edge, but it just doesn't make sense.
And that Dennis said it better than I did. I think that's what I was, with the gap. I just don't feel, if I did the math on the number of the time with the number of students, it doesn't seem to add up to the support for this, the 120, whatever in the balance.
And respectfully, I like this decision seems to be sort of we're identifying these concerns and then a very definite cost linkage to it. And I get that those are two inextricably linked sort of concepts, but I think we have to divorce them and understand what is the issue we're trying to solve, what do we need to solve that issue, and then go figure out what money or what other additional resources do we need to try to solve for that. And then we work with Dawn and Beth and Kathy and whomever to figure out what resources we have to solve for the problem. I get the sense that there is I'll use the term problem, maybe that's a strong term, but there is a situation that we need to throw some resources at, and I'm not understanding how we're making the conclusion that we have enough to deal with the problem at hand.
May I add in a few pieces, Barb, before you respond?
Mhm.
So I think there's a couple of different things, Dennis, to your point about parceling things out. One is, I think, to Barb's point, we're very lucky right now that the people in the interventionist roles who are working with the kids in small groups are certified teachers, and they're being paid at the EA rate. If they weren't certified teachers and were less trained and had less experience, that would be potentially concerning. So that's a blessing right now that I think we need to keep our eye on. Another piece of it is we talked about we have a literacy coach in both schools, which was always part of the plan. Right now we have a math specialist who's shared across the 2 elementary schools and a social emotional specialist who's shared across both elementary schools. There's benefits to that in that there can be consistency in how we deliver the responsive classroom program, the everyday math program, the interventions, the materials we use. We're a lean district. We do not have a lot of instructional leadership aside from myself, Barb, and PLC leaders. So there are benefits to that. That said, if we're going to have specialists spread across schools, it does fall on the classroom teachers and, at this point, educational assistants to deliver the interventions, because as Barb said, if you're in a building 2.5 days a week, you can't be providing interventions 4 to 5 times per week for any given child. So the diagnostic data that we have that we use to monitor students' progress in literacy and in math, especially during these interventions for 4 to 6 weeks periods, which we are entering into our panorama system, I think we can use that data to determine whether or not our system is working and whether or not we do need a full math specialist, we do need an SEL specialist in each building. So I think that's more of a kind of a long-term, let's track the data piece. But I think the more urgent piece right now, Dennis, to your point, is if we have 112 students, granted there's only 6 hours in a day, and yes, some students need math intervention and literacy intervention. You don't want to be pulling them from their English, regular instruction, their regular instruction with their teacher, or, sacrificing time in music class, which might be the only thing they enjoy. So all of these factors, though, to Dennis's point, Barb, do you have enough manpower to provide small groups for these students, both by pushing into the gen ed class or providing small groups during the WIN period?
I know I'm coming across as tentative, and I appreciate that must feel frustrating. We're using the resources we have as creatively as possible. Could our small groups be even smaller? Could our schedules be more optimal and conducive to times when the classroom teachers tell us this would be least disruptive if you came in and worked with my kids at this time, or most optimal if you came in and worked with my kids at this time. So of course, more staff is going to allow us a smaller ratio for intervention groups and more flexibility. That said, our students, every 8 weeks, we revisit those 112 students that we started the year with in the first 8-week intervention cycle. Theoretically, next cycle, maybe fewer kids will need as much intervention, or maybe they'll need different intervention, or maybe they'll need more intervention. So we schedule those interventionists every 8 weeks. Our classroom teachers are working harder than ever. We all are, right? Post, as parents, as community members, as, there's a lot. Today, a second grade class went on a field trip, and the teacher said to me, this was this group's first field trip ever. And I'm constantly reminded of how much exposure and how much doing school our kids have had a different experience thus far, particularly our youngest learners. So yes, more staff would allow us greater focus, greater scheduling flexibility, smaller group ratios, maybe more consultation time in partnership with teachers. We're just, trying to balance the big picture with, the overall budget, using our ESSER money creatively, using our Title I money as it's intended, not to supplant any of the things that should be in the operational budget, but to supplement what's in the operational budget. So,
and as we've said about the ESSER 3 grant, and Nancy, there's a paragraph in your monthly financial that talks about all 3 ESSERs, and they actually got bigger. 1 was small, 2 got a little bigger, 3 was the largest. We sort of put a preliminary budget in for that, but we knew there was so much more data that we needed to acclimate before we knew exactly how all this, the money was going to be spent. So that's something that we said, we put a preliminary budget in. This money is available to school districts through September of 24. So as Barb said, we came back to school, we're 5 days, they're doing all these assessments. We have actually increased sort of some of the assessment tools we use, some of the online curriculum that we've used, I think, to allow kids to have different varying means of what they need to see. Lexia was something that we've added for reading that we sort of paid for. So a lot of times what we do is if things come up during the school year, we pay for it outside the operating budget, right? Because it had not been approved. So that's where we use title grants. We use some of our revolving funds if we need to. We bring it in, and that's what we're doing with sort of the math specialist and the SEL specialist. Those were not budgeted. Those were things that we decided we needed at the beginning of the year and brought those staff on at the end of August. That then we sort of get comfortable that it's something that is needed, and that's when we incorporate it into the general fund budget. So you'll see a lot of times we'll be able to use funds that's not in general fund to react more quickly to situations. The extra, definitely one of the extra EA interventionists is being paid through, not through the operating budget, but through the ESSER. So we are starting to hit and start using the ESSER funds. But I think as you'll see in your budget, we've already worked in the math specialists and extra EA. We're bringing that into the general fund, which will take the pressure off some of our other funds.
That's step 2. Step 2 is figure out how to pay for it. Step 1 is figure out what do we need to go do. And
right, which that's what we've done. Yeah.
Understanding how we've gotten to the conclusion of this is enough to get done what we need to do. If I were to make a very crude analogy, how do we get to green? What is the plan, or how do we measure success related to these 112 students? Is the plan that by, February 15th, all of them will be back on track? Is that a goal? Is that even possible? I don't know. In the business world, you have a problem. You say, okay, what kind of resources do you need to get this project back on track? get back down to wherever it is we need. And you have a defined, measurable goal to get to, yes, everybody feels like this is back on track. I'm having trouble squaring how are you going to get this back to green, if you will? And I don't know if green is ever everybody's back on track. Maybe the new normal is that may be something we're dealing with and sort of a lingering effect. I don't know, but like, what is the goal? And then is the 3-ish people that we have sufficient to achieve that goal? I'm having trouble squaring that in my mind.
So if I could give a few thoughts, and then Barb, I definitely want to hear your expertise. So when you think about, this reiterates, I think, that the idea that at an upcoming meeting, whether it's the Sherborn School Committee or the Joint School Committee, we should really do a presentation on the tiered intervention model and panorama so you can better understand how it works. But that said, in any given time, statistics show that about 20% of a school should be getting tier 2 interventions. That's typical. So if right now we have 112, Barb?
Yes.
Out of roughly 400 students, we're at 28%. So we're over what's typical by 8%. Right now, I think you're still in your first iteration of intervention cycles, right? You identified students through the data team, you're trying the interventions, the teachers and the EAs are working with the kids, and you're monitoring progress. I'm wondering if at the end of this cycle, we can go back and look at the number of students and see if they've kind of parceled out to the closer to 20% realm. That said, some of those kids are going to need tier 3 interventions. So we want about 20 kids total, 5% of the population who might need more. Some of those kids are already identified through IEPs, 504s, special time with the school psychologist. But I'm wondering if, Barb, you think at the end of this cycle, we can review data, look at student growth, student progress, schedules of students, schedules of EAs, and see if it's helping our kids, if we're kind of stagnant, and then figure out why.
And absolutely. And I can talk about kids that get SEL versus reading versus writing versus math support. And we can see kids that, have, obviously a generic way of reporting that to you. We can look at instructional ratios for each of the interventionists. Dennis, one of the things we've talked about, currently our interventionists are being trained in literacy, math, and social emotional learning instructional strategies. Because I want, pick a teacher, 2nd grade Susan Jarbo, not to have the plethora of special education and maybe ELL staff that are supporting in any given teacher's classroom, plus a plethora of interventionists. So we've opted for consistency. So Janine Cox happens to be the interventionist who supports 2J, as an example. In a different model, we might have an interventionist who supports, who's directed by the SEL teacher, and an interventionist who's directed by the literacy coach, and a separate interventionist who's directed by the math coach. We've not been purists in the content area model that I just described, because we're growing all of this in flight, if you will. And as I said, I want the classroom teachers. Some of the classroom teachers have almost as many adults to consult with as they do children to teach. So I'm trying for efficiencies there too. But I'm happy to lay out that data to give you a glimpse of our first 8 weeks of school when we next meet. I'm happy to pull that together in the next month and send it to you well in advance of our next school committee meeting. So you can, right now we're talking, it's a little bit abstract. We're talking about 112 children. Some of those kids need a little shot in the arm. Some of those kids need, very strategic and intensive intervention.
Yep.
And
listen, I think you and the staff are best positioned to figure out what is needed and then what is right and how do you deploy that. Like I don't have that skill set, nor do I have the connection to the details that you guys do. I guess you presented a number of 112. Maybe I'm searching for a burn down on like, how do we get that number from 112 to 100? How do we get from 100 to 75? And maybe that doesn't exist. It's not cute and packaged in a way that's kind of nice and numerical. But I think we collectively need a mechanism to measure progress against helping kids that have fallen behind for any number of different reasons. What that is, I don't know. I'm having trouble translating all of these different things, which I think all of them are great, into, is that enough to solve for the problem that we have presented in front of us? That's all. So if you can help us figure out how do we measure progress against it, I would also suggest we probably need to continue to look at the entire population, not just 112, because there may be a completeness issue and people kind of going in one eye, going from one way to the other. But like, how do we measure progress against this to be doing the right thing for every single one of those kids individually at the school?
Right. And it's compounded, right, by the pandemic. So this is the first time that we have a 0.5 math specialist and a 0.5 SEL specialist ever. And it's after a pandemic. So we don't know what typical progress with those supports in a school year would look like versus what they, typical progress for a student after a pandemic would look like. We're, as Barb said, building the airplane as we're flying it kind of thing. So Barb, if you could put together some data about kind of how the first round of interventions went. I know that you and Allison are just as exhausted as the teachers. If perhaps after Thanksgiving, you could take a few moments and say, this is what an ideal schedule would look like to support the kids, to support the teachers, and see how far away we are from that, and then bring it back to the next meeting. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I was thinking of giving a tangible, Dennis, to if the average classroom teacher has somewhere between 20 and 23 children to educate all day, what is an interventionist caseload? Well, interventionists could run up to 10 intervention groups, realistically, maybe 8 intervention groups in a school day. How many kids are they touching? What's the average group size? What are our teachers supplementing? What are our interventionists? So I'll pull all that together. And this is a great time to do that because we will, as Dawn said, we've built in some additional staff into the operating budget for next year. And this will help us quantify what we're all feeling, that the sense of urgency that we're all feeling.
Yeah, it sounds like you have this population sort of sliced and diced, so you know who needs math, who needs SEL, who needs, reading, writing, whatever it is. So like, maybe it's there, I don't know. And maybe we have 3 interventionists. One person can deal with, 8 groups of 5 a day. So there's 40 kids a day. And if maybe it works, it's just, we've spent enough time here. It's not translating for me. So a little more visibility, I think, would be helpful, and understanding how are you measuring progress against it.
Right. Great discussion, and thanks everyone. And Amanda, I know you have something. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of add, I'm thinking to Barbara, as you're sort of looking at all that data, and I know you do this all the time, is listening to the teachers, because I know, just from listening to this meeting and from my own experience as a parent with kids at Pine Hill, everyone is working so much harder than ever. And, are there ways or is there a way that we could add stuff that just alleviates some of the burden on classroom teachers and on, the educational assistants are carrying so much too. Like everyone's working so hard. So I know you're always listening to people, but thinking about, not only the sort of financial implications, but the human capital that we have that we don't want to lose. Like, we want to make sure that they're able to do their jobs in the best way they can. And because burned out teachers are not good for kids, and we want to take care of our people who are taking care of our kids.
And an advertisement for subs again. If we can please, call grandparents, call neighbors, and have them sign up to be substitutes, that would be super helpful, because sometimes when we're in a pinch, we have to pull these interventionists or classroom EAs to cover for teachers, and that takes away from the small groups that the kids can have. So please get the word out. It'll be in the next Pine Hill newsletter, as well as the other 3 schools, but we're desperate.
Beth, the last time you made that plea, we did get a grandparent sign up to be on our sub list. Thank you.
I have to say Pine Hill's in the best shape of any school, because so many of your retirees have agreed to come back, which is fabulous, because they already know the school, they know the routine. It's not really like having a sub, right? Because they were teachers there for so many years. So that's been great.
All right, great. All right, great discussion. Thank you, everyone. And Dawn, I think I'll turn it over to you for the next few items on the agenda.
Okay, sure. And so just real normal protocol is just your warrant report since the last time we met. Again, if you have any questions, just reach out. Your monthly financial report is as of October 31st. As I've done in the past, I sort of try to keep the narrative there so you don't lose sight of what we've said in previous months, and then in bold, put new information. So there wasn't a lot of new information since our last meeting, except for the circuit breaker reimbursement was finalized. And so you have the details in your report of how that sort of all shook out. The new piece of circuit breaker reimbursement this year, and I think we've been talking about it a little bit, is that we started getting a little bit of reimbursement back on out-of-district transportation, which is a very nice thing to happen. It sometimes can be as more than a school's regular ed transportation. So it's nice that they've recognized that, and they're phasing in reimbursement. 25% of eligible transportation was reimbursed at 75% this year. They'll work their way up to that 100% of eligible transportation would be reimbursed at 75% when all the mandates are being met. So you'll see that increase a little bit each year. Keep in mind, though, it's not your base of transportation. It's based on we file circuit breaker based on individual placements. So a student's placement needs to exceed the threshold for reimbursement before transportation would kick in. Just so you know, it's not going to be that we'd ever get 100% of your transportation cost. And then again, on the back, I just sort of, we're still waiting for approval on our ESSER 3 grants, but for your just information, you've got the amounts of each of the 3 ESSER grants and sort of how we framed the budgets for those and how we're using them currently. Any questions on the monthly report or the warrant report? Okay, so we'll jump ahead to your preliminary look at your fiscal 23 budget. And I just wanted to, for some of you are new, I thought I would just put in a little bit of intro in that we do this preliminary budget is drafted to provide the town a starting point. So every department in the town is required to submit their first version of their budget by December 31st. This allows them a time to get a snapshot of what the budget season looks like for them. And it also gives you guys an opportunity to have some time to digest the budget, ask questions. And so when we come to March to do the final approval, you've had some time to think about it. In your budget book, which I think hopefully you all have, that just quickly, there's an overview, which gives you sort of just I'll walk through the overview on our piece, but it also, the important part of that is the Sherborn Advisory's budget guidance. So please take time to read through that. It also has just a high level summary of the budget so that you can look at the different components and see it in the 5-year analysis versus all the detail that you have in section 2, which is your detailed operating budget by line item. And we try to provide some notes to the side, and it's mainly to address changes between fiscal years. So that's what the notes address. And if some of the line items, say for utilities, I give you some of the statistics about what we're paying for either gas or electricity. In the third section, your enrollments, right now you have your October 1st enrollment just as a sort of a resource. We will provide our projection analysis in your version 2. And that way we'll be able to see where we are. Our projections that we've been using now for probably the last 6 years has actually given us pretty good guidance. So we'll calculate that and have that for you the next go around, just to see if there's growth in a certain grade that would constitute adding a teacher. We feel that there's probably enough staff as far as classrooms, but again, you may see some different numbers of grade level sections depending on how the enrollment sort of settles. As you know, I think you're graduating one of your largest classes, and one that we've actually added a teacher for back 2 years ago. And so that will free up a teacher probably to go help in another grade level. But we'll see where we stand on that. And then your second or your fourth section, the special education, that will have more detail about your out of district. We, in both towns right now, we still have a lot of fluctuation with out of district, which is probably not a surprise, having heard the discussions about how students are, adjusting to changes. So we don't have a good base to do our fiscal year 23 projections at this point. So we will provide that for you in version 2.0. A lot of placements are still under review. And so we don't have final numbers that we usually use to build off on. So that's why that one will be slightly delayed. And then your fifth section is your capital. So tonight we'll walk through version 1 of your 5-year capital plan with the focus on fiscal year 23. Going back just to sort of the overview, obviously, we're happy to say that we're going to build, one of our assumptions that we'll be in regular school operations in person 5 days a week. That never used to be a budget assumption until 2 years ago. So hopefully we'll get to a point where that budget assumption goes away. But for now, we feel like it was safe to still put in there. We also build the budget in compliance with the town's guidelines or guidance. And I will say that one change in the Sherborn's advisories guidance this year, which is beneficial to us, is that in previous years, we were held to 2% increase in salaries. This year's guidance is allowing your contractual increases. So we could potentially have had contracts in previous years that were, say, at 2.25%. Well, that 0.25%, technically we were supposed to go find it someplace else. Obviously, if you know our educators contract, most steps and lanes would greatly exceed that 2%. So that was always something that we sort of had to contend with on an annual basis. They now, though, have given the guidance to be that we are allowed the increase for any contractual agreements that we have. So that gives us a little more funds available. What they did not change, though, and as we all know, everything is getting more expensive. Our operating expenses, they're asking to be level funded. So if you're asking for an increase in something, they're hoping that you can go find the savings in another line item to offset that. With that, however, they are always willing to listen to amounts over that guidance because they typically have a reserve. And so we can request reserves if we need it. At the end of the day, it sounds like a much more stringent guideline than I think than it actually plays out to be in reality. So we abide by it as much as we can, but we never jeopardize or what we need for the student. So we would never say, well, we can't do that because of the guidance. We put everything out there and then we see how we can make it work. And as always, we're continuing to look at the strategic goals of the district to make sure that we're providing whatever funding we need for that, and continuing to assess what our students need in this post-COVID environment. Our key budget drivers, obviously, if you look at your overall little summary, you'll see that salaries, obviously, that's our biggest component of our budget. It's 87%. So that any component with staffing is what's going to drive this budget. I summarized for you what our contractual agreement increases are in our collaborative bargaining units, they are 2 to 2.25%. And knowing that our educators increase can range from the COLA of about, it turns out to be about 2.2% this year for the COLA if you're on the top step, but if you're moving lanes and steps, you could have an additional increase of 4 to 13%. So we have a more even mix, I think, at Pine Hill now with some recent retirements, in that we are seeing some more of those larger increases for certain educators versus we were holding steady at the top step for a while, but we're seeing a little shift in that. The payroll or your staffing includes, obviously we've already been discussing this tonight, the 0.5 FTE for the math specialist. We're adding a 0.3 FTE for ELL educator, and we'll talk about more. I think I've provided you a summary of each position so we could walk through that. 0.2 FTE for the BCBA, and that's something that we actually implemented this year because of students' needs. So we did, that's not budgeted, but we did incorporate that into our actual operating for fiscal year 22. And then 1 educational assistant. We have 2 very small staff reductions, but then do give us some budgetary relief with a 0.2 FTE physical education. That came about with the sort of change in staffing last year, sort of allowed when that job was posted to bring it down to where their schedule was had been developed. So that was a 0.2 relief. And then the way band has been working, it was originally scheduled for a day and a half. What works best in the schedule is a full day of the band director being there. So we get a small decrease in the music. We also have a couple other post fiscal year 22 budget staffing changes. One being a mid-year retirement, which is also providing some budgetary relief of approximately $70,000 against the additions that we're doing. And at this point in time, we haven't been notified of any retirements that will be taking place at Pine Hill. In any given year, if you go back and look at some of our budget presentations towards the end, when we actually realize savings from retirements, you'll see in some years that can be up to $100,000. So retirements can play a large role in our budget process. But this given year, we had the mid-year retirement this year, but we don't have any scheduled retirements that we know about yet for fiscal year 23. We're continuing to trend budget. You'll see some of the individual line items, you'll see some red, so we trended down, but at the same time, things are getting a little more expensive. So you'll also see more increases in some line items. Some line items, obviously, you can't provide level funded, some of those being our bus transportation contract. There's a built-in increase in that. So that's something that we can't hold level. And also things that we can't are services for our cohorts. You'll see that we are increasing some special education services for students. Those aren't salaries, those are outside services that we provide on an as needed basis. So you'll see an increase in that. So again, that's not something that can be level funded. Those are expenses we need based on the cohort of students that we currently have in our school. So right now we're estimating approximately 400 students with our 20 classroom sections. That leaves your class size range right now between 18 and 22. And obviously that's with in your guidelines of between 18 and 23. As I've noted before, the out of district enrollment right now, we're leaving fiscal year 23 as we are right now in 22, which is about 10 placements. One thing, I will point out that I may say we have 10 placements, but if those 10 placements have changed, that they're different students, we can definitely see a change in the total budget, because a student placement can range anywhere from, say, 45,000 upwards to, if there are a residential in a severe program, you could be talking like 330,000. So number of placements are sort of relevant, but they are never comparing apples to apples because of the nature of some of the placements that we could have for students. I wanted to also highlight that there's several initiatives. I mean, here we are in the middle of November, coming back with a lot of time being spent on sort of COVID related issues. So we have some real work we still need to do, in that we are probably going to upgrade our financial system to the cloud. So there's going to be an initial conversion cost for us to do that. Our current software provider, we're housed on a server here, is no longer going to support clients on servers. They want everyone to be on the cloud. So that's going to sort of be a decision. I think it's going to be made for us, but we're still researching what that's going to cost. We're also looking to transition our special education records from a separate system right now over to our Aspen system, which is our student information system. We have a preliminary cost for doing that conversion, but we're looking to see if we can use potentially some grant money to do that. So that's still under discussion. And the last thing would be, as you know, for communications, we had gotten to a point, I think almost 2 years ago, that we were going to upgrade our website. And so we're looking to potentially be adding that cost into fiscal year 23. So I think at the high mark estimate, if we did all three of those and they had to be in your budget, would be 20,000, because remember, the good thing about this is you share the cost with 2 other districts. And so that would be probably the cost that we would put in Sherborn, but then those costs would also go into Dover and the region. I wanted to highlight the staffing changes. So in your section 2, you have a summary of staffing, which gives you by category, but you also have a little more description about the different positions, which I think will be helpful for you as you sort of review what we've done, and especially for the advisory group and for the town people to better understand the additions. So we try to give you a synopsis of sort of what the position's purpose was, and then just give you the salary impact. So basically, you're looking at a 4.69% increase over fiscal year 22. I will highlight a couple of things in that the Sherborn school budget actually has had almost no increase for the past 2 years. So putting that in perspective, our fiscal year 22 was actually no increase, and our fiscal year 21 was actually a decrease of 3.5%. Sometimes that's driven by out of district, but again, as I've mentioned, sometimes it's driven by us being able to have the retirement savings, and we don't necessarily have increased costs to absorb that. So I think that's important thing to sort of take a look at. And the last thing I wanted to just remind everyone is that we did return over $400,000 to the town last year. And so hopefully some of that could be viewed as coming back to the school this year, because we were very fiscally responsible and turned back to the town what we really didn't need during the COVID year. Any questions before I just sort of walk through the timeline, and then we'll go through capital? And so what I usually tell the committee members, there's a lot here to absorb, especially if you go through the detailed line items. If you have questions, if you send them to your chair, Nancy will forward them to us, and then we're able to know where your questions are and provide some feedback and some answers to help give you a fuller picture of some of the line items.
Lisa,
Oh,
can I
sorry.
ask a question on the capital? The air conditioning? Oh, sorry.
Oh yeah, no,
we're not-
yeah,
okay.
no,
All right, sorry. Okay.
we'll walk through the capital. That's
I have
okay.
Sorry, I have a quick question. So you said in fiscal year 21, there was a significant decrease. It's like almost $500,000 or $800,000 from what's projected in FY 23.
The budget to budget was a 3% decrease.
Right. And I guess, have there been other years where we've actually returned money to the town? I worked I worked for the Secretary of State's office in Massachusetts. So, when I worked in government, you usually don't want to return money. You usually want to keep it you want to spend it down, because when you go back and ask for more money, then they're going to be more reluctant to give you more money.
Well, yes and no, and it's the relationship I think that you develop with the town. So some of the savings was on a lot of it. The big chunk of that was almost 300,000 was salaries, and so that was where we had several retirements prior to the first year where people didn't want to really come back into a COVID environment. So so that is, we usually try to stay whole to our budget in that if it's salaries, you spend it on salaries, and if it's operating, we did. So we did go and spend additional operating money for things that we needed. But that's not really how we operate in either Dover, Sherborn, or here, with a little bit of that mentality that we keep everything that we're given.
Okay.
Because we give money back at the region, we give money back at Sherborn, in Dover. So it's just sort of a collaborative approach that we have here. And
Okay.
that we typically are given what we need. So when we have more than we need, we give it back.
Okay. No, that's helpful. Thanks for clarifying.
Yeah.
Detailed questions. Oh, sorry, go ahead, David.
But I will say there was my very first year here, we actually did not have enough money in the Sherborn budget, and we had to go to the town and ask for a reserve transfer. So it can go both ways sometimes.
No, it seems like we have a good relationship, so that's really important. But yeah, I also have other questions regarding capital that I'll wait till the next segment.
Okay.
Question on class size. I'm assuming the current fifth grade is the biggest class in quantity of students. Does this budget assume that kind of extra teacher gets somehow feathered into the remainder of the population, or how are you guys thinking about that?
Yeah, I think I get my schools confused because definitely I know at so Dover, they all don't always have the biggest class sizes in each year, but Dover's biggest class size is also fifth grade this year. So it'll be a large class size coming here to the region. And I know they have their kindergarten was bigger. So we are looking at probably sending their fifth grade teacher. We'll probably create an additional probably first grade teacher. In yours, we'll see how certain grades grow at a faster percentage than others, and that's what our projections will tell us. But that teacher in fifth grade will hopefully give us some release. So if you look at your kindergarten right now, any growth in kindergarten is going to put you close to, you're sort of similar to over, is probably going to put you to a situation where you're going to want 4 first grades next year. So we felt comfortable that we needed that teacher to probably cover another grade once we do the projections and see how things are going to sort of come together for 23. But 21, 21, and 22 works well because kindergarten does get their own educational assistant. So that, is still a good student to staff ratio. But then going into first grade, you pick up any more kids and you're going to be close to your 23. And so that would convert to 4 sections. And that's what the projections will help us, put some insight into that.
And we'll send detailed questions offline.
Okay, perfect. And so just so the timing, so the committee is aware, so this is your, you'll vote this budget tonight so that we can submit it to the town before their December 31st. We will bring version 2.0 to your February 8th meeting. On February 16th is when we actually, and whoever wants to come from Sherborn School Committee, it's typically the chair, and then anyone else who wants to join, we sit down and have a budget discussion with the whole advisory committee. So as you know, we have advisory liaisons who join us on your monthly meetings. This is an opportunity to sit down with all of the advisory members and walk through your budget, and it gives them an opportunity to ask questions that they may have. You then will finish up with your meeting on the March 15th, which you'll have your own open budget public meeting where the public can come. We'll do a formal budget presentation for the public. They can ask questions. Then you'll come back into your meeting and approve your final budget to then continue on the path of the town's meeting schedule. So that's sort of the timeline that we have to work with.
So the vote tonight is just to present a draft.
Yes, version 1.0. Yes, exactly. So it's until you finish on March 15th, your budget can continue to change.
And are we sending to them the summarized, like the
They have the
first tab, or
whole,
are we sending the detailed?
they have the whole book. Yeah. So our advisory liaisons get the same book that you received. So they have all of the detail. We used to give that to the whole advisory, but now we just give it to the liaisons, and then we'll put together a separate budget package when we get closer to their meeting date with the pertinent information that everyone needs to see. Okay. So Nancy, do you want to, just to keep us sort of focused, go ahead and take the motion to approve the version 1.0 as presented?
Oh, that doesn't include the capital.
No, that's two separate votes.
Separate. Okay. All right. All right. Sure. Can I have a motion to adopt or to accept
Yeah.
the approve?
Approve version, yeah,
I get all these. I get all.
I know.
The verbs. Okay. Can I have a motion to approve the draft FY23 budget? Can I have a vote, Dennis or David?
So moved.
Yeah, some second.
Okay. Any discussion?
Yeah, so I have discussion. I mean, this was given to us about 24 hours ago. There's a lot of content in here. I think I have relatively significant reservations about sending something down there, even though it's a budget or a draft, without having kind of pressure tested some of this. I don't think anything sort of is glaringly obvious, but or sort of issue, but I think we need to spend some time with this to make sure that we kind of have confidence in the assumptions that were made. Dawn and sort of entire team appreciate, I'm sure there's an incredible amount of time and effort put into this. So thank you for all the background and some of the notes on the read I did today. It's clear there's a lot of thought that's gone in here.
And that's why my opening intro, I just wanted to let, because some of you are new, that this is just a preliminary budget, but that, it gives a starting point for the town to collect all the budgets from the various departments. This does not bind you to anything except just getting the ball rolling for the town process.
Yep, and I would agree with Dennis's assessment that it's a significant amount of information, and but as you said, great starting points. So thank you for all the effort you guys have put into it.
I'm inferring that we don't have an option. We need to send this to them now, or is that not the case?
You don't have another meeting scheduled. They do need an approved starting point budget by December 31st. But if you go back and look, and I know, so Nancy, you're the only veteran here. And if you look at sort of the budget adjustments that we'll present going forward, you'll see that we add, we take away, we add. So this is by far, like, this is a starting point, but you'll see that we'll make a lot of adjustments along the way. If that, it gives you any comfort. This is, again, just the preliminary placeholder to get the process rolling. But then we will continue to make adjustments in your next two meetings for whatever comes up. And we'll know a lot more information in February than we do now. But you've got to have a point where you sort of at least lay the base of your budget. And we did add things to this budget, which is already putting you ahead of just a base budget. So we've got a good starting point, I think.
So wait, you said December 31st. Today's November 16th. Could we, before officially voting on this, could we just like have a week to kind of dissect this, and I think maybe the committee members talk, together, collaboratively. Sure that
We can talk, but it will be a public meeting. So
Public meeting.
we can call another meeting to vote on it and discuss it, if that's.
But I just want to put the caveat is that it's again, you're submitting a preliminary. I don't know if in a week you're going to know any more than you know now.
Yeah, because we're not.
I think part of it was delivered last night, and I think that.
Sorry.
It's I know. So I think just to even say I approve the preliminary one, if they've never seen the budget before, it's a little bit. It's a big ask.
So it's up to you if you guys want to schedule another meeting. I just know it's hard to get meeting times.
Or Dennis, what are your thoughts?
I think in the spirit of goodwill, and there's a lot of good relationships between us and the advisory committee, that I think it's taken in good faith that there's a healthy dose of sort of review that needs to happen and make sure that we fine tune this. Who do we have in our committee assignments a liaison to the advisory committee?
No. The chair usually is the liaison to the advisory committee. Because they come to us, but we really don't,
No, but in the spirit of they control kind of the purse strings, right? So they're approving the budget at the end of the day. I think
they're recommending a budget for town meeting.
Yeah. The select board, right? Yep.
Yeah.
So I'll just ask again, are we going to approve, or are we going to put another meeting on the calendar to discuss and approve? I'm whatever you guys,
I think, I guess, I think, Dennis, you were, in the spirit of goodwill, I'm assuming you're thinking it's okay to I could be wrong, but in my opinion, I think it's okay to move forward, given that this is preliminary and we're not officially putting a rubber stamp on it, but just to kind of, get the ball. I think it's probably better that they start having more information than no information at all.
So can I have a motion to approve the 23 budget, proposed budget?
Version 1.0. Just so, it's your draft, right? 1.0.
Right.
Oh, so moved.
I will second that.
Okay. We'll take a vote. Let's take a vote. David?
Aye.
Dennis?
Dennis Quant, yes.
And Nancy Cordell, yes.
Okay, so moving on to capital. So you have a 5-year capital plan. The project that actually is on fiscal year 23 right now is something that is relatively, it didn't get pulled in from a previous year. It's actually an add-on. And I provided a little bit of information. So we've encountered over the last 2 summers, more so this summer than last summer, some moisture issues in the C wing of the school. So that's when you come in the admin office. If you go to the right, it's down that where the book room is, towards the library exit, with the that side. And so the tile, the glue actually, because of the moisture, both, I think a little bit, we're still trying to figure out, we've got a couple different opinions. One is it coming from the slab. One is just the humidity in that section of the building, is actually because of the product that they used on the glue, and there's way more information, is actually starting to break apart and seep up, or sort of come up under the tile. So it looks like, should have included a picture. It just looks, it's not a gooey mess, but it doesn't, it looks a little unkept. And it's going to start pulling the tiles up soon. So there's 2 rooms that actually on that one of the sides that has that situation. We had received a quote to have that tile redone. We really from a time frame need to do it in the summer. So it's too big of a job to sort of do over one of our breaks. But when we started looking at the C wing, we decided maybe it'd be better to look at it as a whole in its entirety, and what other rooms in that wing should we go ahead and address. So as you know, we've recently done all the hallways and some of the larger meeting spaces, being the auditorium, the cafeteria, and the library. And so the next thing on our list would be to start looking at the individual classrooms. Some of those classrooms have been recently done. The book room was tiled, I think retiled 2 or 3 years ago. The art room for other issues had been replaced in 2016. That's those are 2 classrooms on that wing. So there leaves 6 classrooms on the C wing. 2 have carpet that are in excess of almost 15 years. And then the other 4 have tiles. So right now we're putting a placeholder in to address the 6 classrooms on the C wing. We're going to actually do a little more research, and we can provide you some additional information, but this is just a placeholder for now. Again, just like your regular budget, we'll continue to have changes to the capital budget up until the March final approval. Because I know one of your questions was the air conditioning. So I'll jump right into that. We don't have, so Sean McGee, our new director of facilities, has been looking at a couple of ideas that we've had for AC. And so we're working with some contractors to come in. And we think one way to address Pine Hill is to do it more by sections of the building versus trying to do a school-wide implementation like was done at Chickering, just because each of those wings is so different. And some of them, like the kindergarten wing, preschool, we actually were able to already over, I don't know how many years you guys have put in window units in those classrooms. So we have on the capital approval from 2 years ago, actually a pretty sizable AC unit that was there for your computer lab. The computer lab is now a regular classroom. And so we are looking into the ability to take that initial piece of equipment, and if we expanded it, would we be able to cover the library wing? So that's the hottest area. So the library wing with those classrooms where we have some start of something. So that's what Sean's working on right now. We've contacted 2 contractors to see if they would come out and tell us what our options are and how involved that would be for duct work, and what we could maybe piggyback on what's already there. So we don't have any credible numbers right now to put on the plan, but it's been discussed, and we still have time to add something, if we can come up with something in the next month or so. Other than that, then it's going to really be probably pulling together a true task force and spending some time probably getting an engineering analysis. There's planning stages involved that or planning steps involved that we would need to do if we're looking for something on a larger scale before we could take something forward to the town.
So what do we need? I mean, because we've had quotes before. I mean, can just even put a line item on here, even if it's out X amount of years, does that sound like it would make this, it would be on here? Because I know it's just the draft, but I mean, that we can put this on here before February. Because I mean, that seems like, a ton of runway to get quotes and,
So, so I think it's coming up with a strategy. And a true plan, because we've had a couple of quotes, and this isn't a new topic. It's been around for a lot before I even got here. And so we did, back probably 3 years ago, we got some quotes, and they were probably in excess of $800,000, which does, I think, cause everyone to step back and just pause at that. So I think it's coming up with a strategy. as to what can we do to address the issue, but then also quantify the impacts, the sort of the number of days that we're up against this, and sort of the
Why can't we use the same rationale as Chickering?
We don't have a lot of the data that they had for Chickering.
Yeah, and I will say that I think they probably had more of an overall heat issue across the whole school because of the way the school was constructed. And I think if we got data from your end, I think we see that each section of the building is a little. One's definitely hotter, than others, and so that's where I'm talking about. Maybe there's a strategy about how we address it more in sections. Exactly.
Right.
And we've had discussions here that may make more sense. So retrofitting certain of the wings with the window units versus installing ductwork for the whole building. So it's trying to find the most effective way to.
Yeah, I thought ductwork might not be like even a thing to do if they could do. And I think we're going into the weeds right now, so I apologize. Do the condenser with the inline.
The mini.
The mini splits still have a lot of plumbing and work, work
but
to
not
do.
ductwork though.
It's
But
not ductwork. Yeah.
Right. Not ductwork. Right.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, from my knowledge, it's a lot of people, and it's not as invasive.
Right.
Into a building or a home, it's actually very minimal. But it's very energy efficient. The electricity bills will be a lot less.
So that is the $800,000 quote we had, was to do the same system that Chickering did.
And you don't
for every part of the school, 800,000.
Yeah.
Okay. So then if we looked at that and did it in sections, I'm just thinking, you know what I mean? Like in the hottest area, then.
Right. Which is what we were trying to see if there's something we could do more, with, so with what's already there, with something that we've already got approved there, if we upgraded the HVAC unit that we've already approved for just the computer lab, what we're learning is that was a pretty high tonnage for that square footage. And so there could be some ways to expand that. And if there's a way that we can go even bigger and cover the library wing, if you remember the library wing, there's all kinds of the air handler and stuff in there, if there was any way to piggyback on that. So that's what we're sort of investigating right now.
Okay.
I spoke at length with the folks that sort of quarterbacked a lot of the work at Chickering, and I think this is a valid discussion, but I think we've got a facilities subcommittee that maybe chats with some combination of folks on the phone here, as well as Sean, and Sean is the buildings.
Exactly. Right.
And,
right.
Peter Gimlet, because there's a pretty stepwise methodical approach that they use that I think effectively summarized the problem and then built an argument for the way to sort of responsibly spend the money to kind of solve the problem. And putting it on here, I think makes sense, but I don't think we would have any idea what that number is. I think, Dawn, is what you're suggesting. So I think between now and February, we could probably come up with a range of numbers that maybe goes on here, but I think it's a bigger in terms of like understanding number of days that it gets to an uncomfortable level. I know that there are some. We had to cancel school early last year. Like, we shouldn't be in that kind of a situation, but I think practically speaking, this goes to the town, and then we try to spend $1 million to prevent school being closed for one day. I think that that's going to run into a lot of like, really, is that how we're going to spend? So I think we have to be more understanding of the issue we're trying to solve for, and then sort of tie in that engineering study or some other kind of assessment to figure out what our options are and the cost of each.
Right. So as I reminded you, I think what I said before, so Chickering funded sort of the engineering feasibility study out of their operating budget so that they had actually more credible data to bring forward. to capital. And with that, then they pair that with the data. So it's similar. They actually piggybacked on what the middle school did, 4 or 5 years before Chickering did. So the middle school was retrofitted. The middle school had no air conditioning back in the day. So they piggybacked on what the middle school did as far as capturing the data, having graphs and showing, which sections of the buildings were exceeding the OSHA temperature, but also the ones that were just, where they had some rooms that were in the 90s, and both in the middle school and at Chickering. So I think that's where, we probably need to formalize. They had a pretty organized and a well-oiled task force that was some school committee, but also they brought in some parent experts. I actually was on school committee when we did all that. So I think that we probably should just buckle down and do that. Peter can definitely grab some data. And I think Angie back in the day had some previous data that Peter had given her. So it's probably just taking the time to sit down offline as the building committee, like you said, with Peter and Sean and whoever, if you have any other community members who are, have some information to add. I think we had 1 or 2 people that actually had some of that as their expertise. And so that just added some credibility to the group. And then, we can definitely put an RFP out to do a true feasibility engineering analysis, because then their recommendation would mean more than us just saying this is what we think we should do. So Dennis, are there 2 of you on, or just are you the only one on facilities?
I think it was Angie. I don't know if those have been recast. So.
Oh, okay. So let's, Dennis, we can connect. And like I said, Sean's working on just seeing if there was any feasibility in doing a thought that we had that could be more immediate, but we can move forward with the, just getting some better marching orders.
Yeah, Nancy, I think it would be a good goal that by February, when I think this needs to be more finalized, to try to have gotten enough progress, and I'm happy to commit to doing that, to put some kind of a number or estimate in the later out years.
Okay.
On something like this.
Okay.
And I can put a note on this. So we're a little bit ahead of the game because the town capital committee hasn't reached out yet looking for the plan, but I sort of piggyback on what I need to do for the other districts. So we're a little bit ahead of the game on this, but we can definitely put an asterisk that this is a project under review that could be adjusted, in your next version, just to make it both apparent to them or transparent to them that it's something that you guys are considering.
Just on a side note, so when I look at the capital plan, one of the concerns I have is, I've been part of a capital committee before, and I look at the criteria of the nature of requests, and many of these are, practically all of them are all number 3, which is maintaining the status quo. And obviously doing the AC project would be something that would fall under number 5.
Mm-hmm.
But think 5 years out, are there other things that we should be thinking ahead of? Because it's a little concerning that many of these things are just status quo to me that stand out.
Let me add and actually I sort of jumped in this because you guys got me on the AC. So we actually have a 20-year capital plan that was done by an outside group. It's called On-Site Insight. And so it's our roadmap. So it actually looks at all of our operating systems, looks at the whole building, and has both maintenance and capital items. So it's a roadmap for us for maintenance because we carry a maintenance budget in our operating budget to take care of things that are, say, fall below capital and things that we want to maintain because that prolongs the life of things. But it also then projects out our 20-year capital plan. So the things that you're seeing on here are because our capital plan said it's time based on the useful life of this and industry standards for you to take a look at replacement or upgrade or improvement. So that's sort of what fills our draft here are those items. And then what we do is as it gets closer, we take a look. So say, for example, the roof covering was, I think on, it was a placeholder. So we started looking at it. So we had a consultant come out, and actually all of our rooftops across the district seem to be all having the same useful life. So we've got an inventory of roofing replacements to do. So they came out and assessed all of our roofs and did both with their expertise, but also we did infrared scans on all of them. And that sort of gave us a timeline of ones that we needed to address sooner than others. Pine Hill actually was in pretty good shape as far as what they consider to have wet spots. I think it was like 3 or 4%. So that was that was really low compared to what we saw at some of our other buildings. So the on-site insight report gives us things that we need to start looking at. And then we perfect where it needs to go in the 5-year plan. So it's sort of because something shows up on the on-site insight report for, say, fiscal year 25 doesn't mean we're going to end up doing it in fiscal year 25. We've just taken a look at it, assessed it, and decided where we are on that. So for the new members, I can give you a copy of that report just to see that we have a pretty extensive base that we work off of for the 5-year plan.
Yeah, that would be great if we could get a copy.
And not to say, so things that would like AC obviously would not be in our on-site insight report, right? Because that's something that we're adding. Or for things that are improving productivity, they're not taking that into consideration. They're looking at your physical plant that is there now and telling you how to maintain it the best way you can.
But couldn't AC be number 4, meeting legal requirements if it's too hot in the room because of OSHA? I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. Like I'm just, yeah.
Right.
So to that point, then, if this 20-year roadmap is more towards items that fall under category 3, can we, think about other things that, would take the facility, to the next level? Because I think it's important, as parents and, folks that, are looking for new schools, they look at new towns, facilities matter. And I think it's important to kind of, have overarching goals, and a vision that would take the facility to the next level. And I know a lot of this is dependent on monetary finite resources, but
that's definitely something, right? And so that exactly, I mean, that thought process can overlay, this is just the basic of keeping the building functioning and, well kept. I will say that we do, both towns do provide, I think, what I would say, they go above and beyond in giving us money for our preventative maintenance and sort of our building reserve for things that we can do during the year, because they do want to keep the buildings in good shape. So when you want to go above and beyond that, that's something that we can definitely discuss, but that's sort of the baseline. I think that all 3 districts sort of look at for capital.
Okay. That's great. Thanks.
Right, great. So I'm looking at the time, and so I just, do we also vote on the capital budget separately?
Right, just so you have one, because probably in the next 2 or 3 weeks, they're going to be asking for the first version of this, and it's similar to the town. They will, you'll be able to change this. There'll be one meeting that we'll have with the capital budget committee, which is separate from advisory. where they'll want to just sit down and talk about this. And typically, like Dennis and Nancy probably would join me at that meeting. And they'll just ask their questions, and they're doing their due diligence for all the capital projects across the town, because they take our 5-year plan, put it with all the other departments. And so obviously they're trying to, sort of level fund big projects if they can spread them out to make it more advantageous for them if they need to borrow or not borrow. That's sort of what they look into.
All right, great. Can I have a motion to approve the draft version of the capital budget for year 2023?
Wait.
And I was going to say, add the motion that I will add a note on here about the potential air conditioning project under
Well,
review.
again, I guess it's proposed, it's just a draft anyway, right? I mean, anything can be added. So, all right. So can I have a motion to approve the
fiscal year? Yeah. So you're doing the 5 plan, but the one that's the most important is the fiscal year 23 actual financial ask of the 75,000. Yeah.
So could you actually send pictures to us about future issues going on?
Oh, the floors. Yes. Yep. Sean has some. I can get those from him.
All right.
And we would add that to, we would share that with the capital committee too. That would be the type of information they would be expecting from us to share.
Okay, great.
All right. So Don, I think I was correct in saying,
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
year 20.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
All right, let's I'm just trying to move this, get this going. Can I have a motion to approve the proposed 2023 budget draft for the capital?
So move.
Dennis Quant, second.
Okay. Any discussion?
The only thing I have a question on, in the roof covering, you put $1 million in 2024, but there's in the note, it sounds like there's some repairs. Is that just OpEx that will be spent this year, or is that?
Yeah. So we're going to do the repair. Actually, they're probably going to be done the next month.
Okay.
The other schools did all their repairs, but because of your road work, we couldn't get them in there to do. So yours didn't get done. So we're going to have them come out and do those before the winter. So that's what gets covered under your reserve in your fund for your building reserve funds.
Okay.
And the $1 million, that was actually, there was a study that.
Yeah. So we had a roofing consultant come out and give us the review and give us baseline prices. And so that was for the restoration. We can get into the restoration versus complete replacement. But we're a candidate for restoration, which means that we can talk about it, but it's less expensive than restoration. It gives you a 20-year extended useful life, which is a little shorter than a complete replacement. But from a cost standpoint, a complete replacement is probably at least double the $1 million based on their number. So but it just gives us a placeholder to start working with.
Okay, great.
And we're going to have some experience with restoration because the region actually has 2 roofs that will be on the fiscal year 23 capital request and potentially would be done this coming summer. So it'll give us a good experience level for the other 2 elementaries.
Okay, so great, thank you. We're going to take a vote. David?
David Kazis, yes.
Dennis Quant, yes.
Nancy Cordell, yes. So next up, we have to approve the new tuition for 2023, which Don will.
Right. So you have 2 tuitions to approve, and we approve it now. One, because the pre-K, the applications are getting ready to go out. While we do that, then we go ahead and set the non-resident tuition rate just so we're prepared if there are any students to attend non-resident based Pine Hill next year. So we're just looking for a 1% increase in the tuition rate for the pre-K programs, both at Dover and Sherborn. We're looking at, we looked at comparable rates for the other public school programs for IEP, pre-integrated programs, and also knowing that it's been an interesting 18 months with pre-K. So the discussions between Kate McCarthy and Naomi O'Brien and myself was that we settled on 1%. So we're just looking for a 1% increase in your 3-day rate and your 5-day rate for next year.
What are the current rates?
So it's current rates. So that the 1% less than 5,885. So we're just looking for a 1% increase. I don't have last year's rates in front of me. So we're just asking for 1%. So it's 99% of $5,885 for a 3-day, and the 5-day rate is $10,410.
Do I approve them together, or?
Yeah, you'll just approve the fiscal year 23 pre-K tuition.
Okay, and then we do separate for the non-resident tuition?
Yeah, it's 2 different motions. Yeah.
Okay, all right, great. Could I have a motion to approve the pre-K tuition for 2023? Or is it, yeah. 20.
Yeah, 2022, 23.
David Kazis, so moved.
Dennis Quant, second.
Okay, let's take a vote. David?
David Kazis, yes.
Dennis Quant, yes.
Nancy Cordell, yes.
Your non-resident tuition is based on the most recent per pupil cost that DESE posts. And so it's fiscal year 20 is what we pull. And that number, which was just recently posted, actually is 21,731. That caveat with that is if a student comes in and needs additional services over just a normal placement, those costs are added on to that amount. So we've had cases before where students maybe have needed some EA support, one-to-one, or some other pull-out services. Those additional costs are added on to that base rate. So that's just your base for a student attending Pine Hill as a non-resident.
Okay. Can I have a motion to approve the non-tuition, the non-resident tuition for year 22-23?
David Kazis, moved.
Dennis Quant, second.
Okay, and for a vote, David?
David Kazis, yes.
Dennis Quant, yes.
Nancy Cordell, yes.
Perfect, thank you.
Just out of curiosity, how many students do we have that are non-residents at Pine Hill?
Anywhere, usually maybe sometimes from 1 to 2. Knowing that will be in all transparency, they're usually from Dover. We don't have them from other. We're not a school choice town, so this is more of a committee to committee agreement that we've made probably 5-6 years ago. And so it's kept at least 1 or 2 students in Pine Hill all those years. I'm not sure we'll have anyone next year, but if we happen to have one, at least we have the rate set.
Got it. Thank you.
Dawn, is just for my own information, is Chickering the same rate? Or is
Chickering doesn't have a non-student tuition set up right now.
Okay, great.
A non-resident, I'm sorry, a non-resident.
A non-resident.
You had to vote to set that up, and you have actually a revolving fund for that. Right now, Dover does not have one of those funds. So they'd have to establish that and then start setting the rates.
Okay, all right, great. All right, next up is the homeschooling policy, the second read, to approve after the second read. So I'm gonna can I have a motion to approve the homeschooling, the new homeschooling policy?
David Kazis, so moved.
Dennis Quant, second.
Okay, and a vote, David?
David Kazis, yes.
Dennis Quant, yes.
Nancy Cordell, yes. All right. Next is the minutes of October 19th. Can I have, oh, and I didn't say any discussion, and I apologize for the last, I'll just do it this time. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes from October 19th, 2021?
David Cates is so moved.
Dennis Quant, second.
Any discussion? All right, let's vote. David,
David Cates, yes.
Dennis Quant, yes.
Nancy Cordell, yes. All right. This just for our information that we have the minutes for the Regional School Committee and the Dover School Committee. And if there are any items for the next meeting, which isn't to February, which is, seems so far off, please send them to me if there's specific things we want to put on the agenda. And by unanimous consent, can we vote to adjourn?
Can we just
Oh,
talk about item 10 for a minute here? That it does. Oh, I love 2-3 hour meetings extended into the evening. Does February 9th feel too long to have another meeting? That we've talked about a lot today, that some I think would benefit from discussing sooner.
May
Yeah,
I
I
also
would-
add that I believe it's February 8th, 2022.
Yeah, I had a note about that.
Oh,
as well.
okay.
I think it's 8th, not 9th.
So Dennis, so typically what we do is we present the budget, then there's joint meetings. And
Yep.
so if there was anything that came up, we could definitely probably do tack on to that in January, or Dover's doing their meeting in January, but they don't have a meeting in February. So it's sort of just the cycle that the warrant advisory group follows. And but there's nothing saying that if that's what you want to do, that we can't add something on, but we probably won't have the next version of the budget until February.
Yeah, understood that there's a lot of work for the budget. I think maybe we'll chat with Barbara sort of directly, or Beth, or somebody related to some of the student performance stuff that we discussed earlier. But yeah, Nancy, I'm happy to email with topics if that's easier than discussing here.
but yeah, I think it is, given the time as well. So, but I take your point. I do take your point. It does seem like a long time, given the urgency and time spent on the topics that we did spend today. So I agree with that. So anyway, we'll discuss it. Okay. We have a unanimous consent to adjourn the meeting tonight. Thank you, everyone, for your time, and thank you for the discussion too. So I think it was important, and it was good. It was a great discussion. And Dennis and David, it was great to have you for the first time during the budget cycle and asking good questions. And so I appreciate where you both come from, and your expertise and skill set you bring to the table. So, and next meeting, February 9th, we'll have
February 8th, go back, sorry, February 8th.
the 8th, whatever. It's in February. That's February 22. We'll have our new Sherborn School Committee member as well. So.
I think
Sorry, tomorrow night is the selectmen's, is that right? Meeting, and all candidates are going to be there?
That is the 18th.
Thursday or Thursday night?
Thursday
Thursday.
night. Yes.
Okay.
You have to be, we need a quorum. So.
Yep, I'll be
Counting
there.
on everyone to be there it will be like a 15-minute, our portion will be like a 15-minute or less.
Do you want me to send a message to all the committee members based on some of the conversations I have with the candidates, or because I missed the first candidate? Or are we making a recommendation, or we're not?
You were going to follow up? We can just talk offline, but you were going to follow up with
Yep.
the
Yeah,
one
I'm
that you had missed. Okay.
going to follow up with her tonight, but probably tomorrow. So.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Okay. Well, let's vote to by unanimous consent. Can we adjourn tonight's meeting?
Yeah.
So moved. All right. Great. Again, thank you so much, everyone.